We are now talking to ex-NFL 11-year veteran wide receiver, Brandon Lloyd. What's going on, Brandon?
Nothing much. What's going on, y'all? Good to have you.
Absolutely.
Good to be on.
Well, it's good to have you. I mean, seriously. I mean, you have had an amazing career. And before we get into your amazing career, we'll talk about the divisional games and what you think is going to happen this weekend. What have you been doing since your retirement? I mean, seriously, you had a great year, a great career.
Yeah, I say retirement is when you really find out who you are, and especially coming out of the league. But I had an opportunity to return back to the University of Illinois and get my undergraduate degree, which was a huge milestone. Thank you. I am enrolled in getting my MBA at the University of Denver currently, and I'm serving in the nonprofit space for CareerWise Colorado. So we place high school students in white collar apprenticeships, and so that's just been pretty impactful work. So combine that with a lot of philanthropy and just and networking and reconnecting my relationships with my family and friends. So it's been a pretty powerful retirement.
You've had an illustrious career. You really did. 11 years in the NFL in one of the biggest and the best leagues in professional sports. You got to play with a lot of great teammates and a lot of great players. But we were just talking about the San Francisco 49ers. And by the way, you played for the San Francisco 49ers 3 years of your career. What was it like playing in San Francisco in the early 2000s? And where, being that you're an alumni now of all those San Francisco great teams that we've seen, in the 90s, the starting and the growth of what this team has become over the new era. What was it like playing for the San Francisco 49ers?
Yeah, well, I played for the 49ers twice. I started my career there, and then I went back and played in the 2014-15 season under Harbaugh. But going there in 2003, which was the year after they lost to the New York Giants in the playoffs, I arrived at the team thinking it was, there was a lot there. There was a lot of opportunity. But, you were just talking about Jeff Garcia. But the team, ended up imploding, with the Jeff Garcia and the Terrell Owens beef. And so I had a front row seat at that debacle, which was pretty frustrating, being a young person, being a new player in the league and wanting to find my way and needing some mentorship, and not getting that from one of the greatest players to play at all time. We all knew it at the time. It wasn't a secret. But yeah, the lore was still there. Bill Walsh was still cruising around. Terry Donahue, may he rest in peace, was still floating around the stadium. So those legends were there. Lott, Roger Craig, all those guys are still floating around the city and, engaged in business activities. So the plan in the city of, and that was when we were playing in Candlestick. And so the stadium was still in the city. And so it was a really neat vibe of the city supporting the team having that NFL lore, and then those Hall of Famers still being around. So it's definitely a fun town to play in. Completely different vibe playing in Silicon Valley, but it still has the same the same desire to win, the same winning attitude, and the same support from the fan base. So it was a tough. That was a tough end to Harbaugh's run there.
Right.
When I got there, again, just kind of, a year late, just like the first time.
So Errol usually asks this question, but since he didn't, I will. What was the draft night experience like for you? The moment you found out you were a San Francisco 49er back in 2003?
Yeah, it was more draft day. I always say the only person happy in the NFL draft is the first overall pick. Everybody else thinks they should be drafted higher. So, I was scheduled to be a first day pick 1 through 3 and ended up slipping all the way to the 4th round. And so I wasn't picked until that next morning. So draft night, I was livid.
I'm sure you were.
And then I wasn't even watching it the next day. And actually went to track meet because I was home in Blue Springs, Missouri, and I went to a track meet and was kind of spending the day at the track meet. And then I got a call from my agent like, hey, you need to get home. The 49ers are going to pick you. So I, got back home, and, that call was more for me. They were surprised because they were like, oh, dude, we woke up and we couldn't believe your name was still on the list, but here we are, you're coming to San Francisco. And so for me, I arrived with a chip on my shoulder because I definitely wanted to prove that that I had the talent to play at a higher level than what was projected of me.
Mr. Lloyd, how are you? Obviously, we've touched on San Francisco, and you played with a lot of my favorite players, Antoine Randall, Clinton Portis. He's one of my favorite running backs of all time. But I'd be amiss if we didn't dive into the name you had said about 2 minutes ago. A lot of people to Terrell Owens, he's a bipolar figure. You either love him or you hate him, and a lot of people have no middle ground for the man. I am one of his biggest advocates. I obviously I wasn't in the locker room. You said you were a little frustrated that he didn't guide you, it seemed. What was Terrell Owens like as a teammate for that year in San Francisco?
Oh, he was difficult. It was difficult because what was challenging was as a new player in the NFL, we're so humble and we're so malleable, and we're looking to give a lot of respect to coaches, ownership, and particularly the veteran players. They are the most important people in a young player's career. And his actions went against everything that you're taught as a little league player, as a high school player, a collegiate player. It just went against everything. It's just from cussing out the coaches on the sideline to not practicing, treating teammates with disrespect. And so it was just it was shocking. It was shocking to see as a young player in the league, like, oh, this is really what the NFL is about. That what I was seeing on NFL films is not necessarily what I'm seeing in the locker room. So it was difficult. It was difficult to watch one person make a decision to sabotage the team, and then it happened, especially with the team with so much talent on it. So that was really frustrating. On the other hand, there was a lot to see because I never seen anyone work so hard before in the weight room. And the days that he did practice, I mean, he would work out with bands on his legs to restrict his movement. And he was going in one-on-one periods against these defensive backs with restrictions on his legs and just mopping people up. And it was just, and then he'd take the bands off about, a quarter of a way through practice and just practice. I mean, it would just be a sight to see him on the practice field. So there was a lot of positive in there where it's like, all right, the way he took care of his body, the way he ate, there was a lot of things to take away that I can put into my quiver and kind of build my own player. But just kind of like what you were getting at is that, it's frustrating that when you think about him and all the talent that he had, that it's the off the field stuff that gets in the way from really celebrating his athletic career.
As everybody knows, we are talking to 11-year NFL vet, wide receiver Brandon Lloyd. Brandon, there was a lot of parts of your career where you had some great years. In 2010, you had your best year. You had over 1,400 yards. You had 11 touchdowns. You were a sensational player. I think you made the Pro Bowl that year as well.
Yeah, Pro Bowl and All-Pro.
Yes,
yep.
All-Pro. You were sensational. It really stood out. You really stood out as one of the best wide receivers in the league. Could you tell us about that year being under Josh McDaniels and all the things that we heard about Josh McDaniels as a head coach, where everybody says he was horrible, but you had your best year with Josh McDaniels.
Yeah. There's a lot to unpack there. Just for me coming from, leaving the Washington Redskins,
right.
And being.
Be careful now. Washington football team.
The Washington football team.
Sorry, I call them Redskins all the time.
Team, 2 years into a 7-year deal, and then being brought into Chicago by Ron Turner, who was my college football coach, under Lovie Smith. Ron Turner was the offensive coordinator. And so it really gave me an opportunity to salvage my career after the bad press I was getting in DC. And I tore my knee up leaving during that Bears season, and then again got cut after my 1-year deal. They didn't re-sign me. Mm-hmm. And I played with Orton there. Orton was in the trade with Cutler, ends up in Denver, and then he gives me a call. I mean, this was July. I was getting ready to start a media career at the Big Ten Network. I was thought I was done with football. You know, it was like getting ready to go back to school and finish up my degree. This is 2008. This is 2009, and I got a call in late July or at the beginning of July, and Orton's like, "Hey, dude, what kind of shape are you in?" I'm like, you know, I play basketball Monday, Wednesday, Friday with the hip hop community on the south side of Chicago. I play with some DJs and some rappers and some pastors out there. I'm rock climbing with some chefs in my neighborhood here in Lake Forest, Illinois, on Tuesday, Thursdays, and Sundays. And I'm powerlifting with my dentist, who's an amateur triathlete, Russian Jewish guy. He's enormous. So I'm like, I'm in a weird good shape. And so Josh calls me up and brings me out to a workout in Denver, and I lit it up. And what Josh said to me, he says, "Do you remember I ran your pro day at the University of Illinois?" And I was like, "No." He was like, "Yeah, the Patriots, we ran your pro day at Illinois." He says, "If you can play anywhere near the way you played then, I'll make you all pro."
Wow. He wasn't wrong about that. That's for sure.
Yeah. So, it was just an absolutely neat opportunity to, because my first year there was 2009, and that was when they were feeding Brandon Marshall a bunch of balls, and Stokely and Eddie Royal was a fan favorite. And so I was brought in as an insurance policy, but, I was a 7-year vet, so I had a guaranteed contract. And so, that brought a lot of attention to how Josh is managing the roster and the salary cap. And just that year, the players stayed remarkably healthy. It's one thing you can guarantee in the NFL is like receivers are going to get hurt.
Of course, yeah.
And no one got hurt. It wasn't until the end of the year when 2 of those receivers started faked injuries because they wanted to protect themselves going into free agency and to the next season, and the team was losing. And so it gave me an opportunity to get on the field for 2 games. And, I had a lot to offer in those last couple games. And so once they traded away Marshall and made some other roster moves, it, put me in the number 1 receiver position. And it was just, that 2010 season, I stayed remarkably healthy. I can't even explain it. I was like 100% going into probably 10 of those games. It was incredible. I was incredibly healthy. And the other component to that was Josh McDaniels actually believed in my talent. So I was actually able to show display the talent that everybody knew that I had. Right. And, everyone's talking about, "Oh, you have talent, but I actually needed a coach to actually call my number."
Right. And
then the third component to that was Kyle Orton. And he actually picked me to throw the ball to, over all the other players. That's the biggest component to being a wide receiver and having that relationship. We actually liked each other. We got along with one another. We had similar interests. And so it was just really neat friendship. And I think those are the 3 components that led up to that. Obviously, I call it, I was prepared for that. I had prepared myself. It wasn't like I was sitting on the couch, wishfully thinking.
Right.
It's the point where, opportunity and effort meet is what I call it, because I've always considered myself an effort guy. I was always, diving for the ball and trying, doing extra to make the plays and making the spectacular play. So that effort has always been there. But then I had that opportunity with those 2 components, the head coach and the offensive coordinator, who are the same person, and the quarterback.